Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today, I'll be reviewing Traders of Osaka. In this game, players play Japanese merchants who are acquiring money in order to purchase goods at a market and then ship them off to be sold for a profit of victory points. The problem is that ships have a tendency to get lost and sunk in storms at sea, and your opponents have a way of affecting the weather on those ships. So first, I'm going to go through a bunch of turns to show you how the game actually feels while you're playing it, and then I'll jump into my review. Here's the starting setup for a 3-player game of Traders of Osaka. We have the 3-player colors down here. Each player has a starting hand of cards whose values equal to or exceed 8 when you sum up the numbers. Players also begin with a bonus chip of their choosing. There are 4 different colors which correspond to the 4 colors of goods out here. So the gray player chose red, pink chose yellow, and then the tan player chose red as well. That's fine, they don't have to be different colors from each other. On each turn, a player must choose 1 out of 3 different options to evaluate their whole turn. The first of these options is to buy the goods on the market, and that is this row here. But in order to do that, they have to discard cards from their hands with the values that sum up to the total number of the goods on the whole market. You can't pick and choose. So right now, the cost to buy everything on the market is 12, and the gray player only has 9 buying power in their hands, so that is not an option for their turn. The second action option for your turn is to simply draw 1 card from the market and pull it into your hand as gold. So it is no longer the suit that it is, it's just the number. And the third action option is a player can take their reservation token and put it down on any card either in the market or here in the future farms. These cards will be shifted down once the market depletes, so you have some idea of what's coming in the future. So our gray player could, for instance, put this token down here. And what this means is no other player can ever take this card either through buying cards on the market or just drawing cards into their hand for money. So now it's the pink player's turn, and they have 10 buying power in their hand, which is still not quite enough for the 12 out here on the market. So they might choose just to draw this 3 value card into their hand, and now they have 13 buying power for their next turn. You'll notice that the market does not automatically replenish. That happens at predefined times, which I'll get to in a minute. It's now the tan player's turn, and you'll notice that the market is much cheaper. It only costs 9 total to grab because the pink player took that 1 card, and the tan player actually has 12 buying power in their hand. So they're going to choose to buy the cards on the market. In order to do this, you have to discard the buying power equal to or greater than that sum. So in this case, they could discard these 3 cards, which totals 10 value, which is more than 9, to the discard pile. And then the tan player is going to take all these cards and display them in front of them. At this moment, I would like to point out that there is a bit of a graphical glitch with only the red 3 in the game. One corner is fine. You see a little 3, that's great. But the other corner appears to have a 2 underlaid underneath that 3, making it kind of look like a backward 6. It's not a big deal, but it threw us off a couple times. So these goods that were purchased go into little columns in front of that player, and these are now not in their hand, and they're not able to use the gold value of these. Instead, they're going to try and ship these for victory points. Every time a player buys from the market, we're going to go to the farms in order to replenish the market for the next players. So these cards shift down, but there's always got to be up to 5 cards in the market, so we draw 2 more randomly from the top of the deck, and then we draw 3 more for the next future farm cards. The last part of the market purchase phase for a player is we need to move up the associated ships down the coast of Japan. That means we move the red, yellow, and green ships. The yellow and green ships both move once because there's 1 of each of those cards. The red ship is going to move twice because of the 2 red cards. It's important to note that if the tan player had purchased 3 red cards in the market, this ship would still only move 2. That is the maximum movement value of these ships. It's once again the gray player's turn. They have 9 buying power in their hand still, and the market now costs 20 because, well, they still have to get this card. It's theirs. They put the reservation token down. So instead, they're just going to go ahead and grab this 5 power card, and now on their following turn, they'll have 14 buying power to potentially buy stuff from the market. And now it's the pink player's turn, and the market only costs 10 for pink because gray put this reservation disc down. That means pink has no way to get this card, so it effectively does not exist. So they can go ahead and spend 10 power from their hand into the discard pile in order to purchase all of these cards and put them into their area in front of them. This would of course move the blue ship twice and the yellow ship once. And lastly, because a market purchase phase happened, these cards are going to slide down. We would draw 1 more from the top and then 3 more again for the farms. At this point, I'm going to skip forward a few turns so that I can show you how selling your resources work. Alright, so our pink player is going to spend these 2 cards to the bank in order to purchase from the market because they put the reservation token down. This is going to move the yellow ship and the blue ship up once. This puts the yellow ship into harbor at Edo, and this is the moment that we are going to sell our goods. The first thing that happens is that each player is going to sell all of their yellow goods because the yellow ship is the only one that went into harbor. There's a bit of an equation to go through to figure out how many victory points you're going to get, so let's jump right into it. The first thing you do is you look to see what your highest card is. In this case, it would be 5, so that is the price for yellow. For the pink player, however, they have this yellow bonus chip, which adds 1 to the price. So we have 5 plus 1, or 6 for the total price. Now we multiply 6 by the number of cards that we have taken to Edo. So in this case, 6 times 2 is 12. Now we round that number to the closest 5 divisor going up. So 12 turns into 15. And then we divide that number by 5 again, bringing us down to 3, which means they score 3 points or 3 cards. In this case, they only had 2 goods, so they draw 1 more from the top of the deck. Doesn't matter what it is, it gets put face down underneath the small chip here to show that they have 3 victory points in the bank. For the tan player, they just have this single 2. So 2 is the price, 2 times 1 is 2. You round that up to 5, and then divide by 5, and you only get 1. So they just score this single card here because their bonus chip was red, and that doesn't apply to yellow sales. And finally, the gray player over here, they also don't have a yellow bonus, so their price is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. You round that up to 10 and divide by 5 means you score 2 cards here. So the pink player definitely made out best out of all this with 3 points, and then 2 for gray and 1 for tan. Next up, each player is going to get a bonus chip of the ship that they just sold good for. So now the pink player has 2 and everybody else has 1. And now it's time for the black tide. If you look over here, you'll see that there are 3 different locations on this map that are on the mainland, but 2 of them are out in the middle of the ocean. Well, the black tide hits every time a sale happens in Edo. That means all the ships that are out at sea get pushed back to Inori, but even worse, they lose all of their goods in that process. So every single player is going to lose all of their red and blue cards that they have purchased. However, some cards have these little insurance icons on them. The 2s all have 2 of these icons, the 3 value cards have 1, and the 5 value cards have none. So the pink player can discard this card right here in order to protect 2 of their blue goods. In this case, they'll probably protect the 5 and the 3, and this 2 blue is lost at sea. The tan player has no red cards at all, so they cannot insure these 2 goods, so they are lost at sea. And finally, our gray player here, they could discard this 3 that has a single insurance icon on it, so they will, in order to protect this card right here. But unfortunately, their 1 red card is a 5. It has no insurance tokens, so this really nice red good is lost. Finally, our yellow ship will travel all the way back to Osaka to make the route again, and then we would shift these cards down, fill up the market, and it would then go on to be the tan player's turn. And this is pretty much the entire game. You're going to keep doing this until at the end of a payday where people sell. If one player has 8 or more of these little bonus chips, then the game ends immediately. At that point, you're going to count up all of the cards that are underneath these little tokens, and these are just victory points 1-to-1 for the cards, and you'll see who has the most cards and that person wins. So let's start the review section off with the first positive point, and this has to do with the fact that there are a very small amount of things that you can do on your turn, but how you do those is still interesting to think about. You know, the first thing is you could use a reservation token, and it seems like those are rarely used, so maybe you look at the board and you're like, oh, I don't need the reservation token, I'm not going to worry about that. The second thing, you look at the board and you say, can I even buy all these cards? Maybe you don't have enough money in your hand, so don't worry about it. You can't do that. So the third thing that you can do, pretty much the only thing you're going to want to do in this one hypothetical turn, is you're going to draw 1 card from the market and put it in your hand for money. Well, which card do you draw? Do you grab that 5 because it gives you a lot more buying power to buy cards in the market on your next turn? Or maybe you grab that red 2 because you could see the next person in line, the next person who's going to take their turn, just needs a single red to push that ship into harbor, and they have a bunch of cards in their hand, they can probably buy them. So you might take that card specifically because you don't want that red ship to move because it'll sink a blue ship and you have a bunch of blue goods and you can't insure them. And there's just all these things to think about. Or maybe you just look over and you say, oh, I don't really care, nobody's in jeopardy, I'm going to take the 5. That was a pretty simple turn. What this ends up meaning is most turns are pretty quick. Like, you can just do some quick math, can you even buy from the market? And usually if you're in a situation where you can buy from the market, it'll only take you, I don't know, 10 seconds to look at your area and look at the boats and decide whether that makes sense to you. Now, of course, somebody could tunnel down really hard, but thinking about, oh, well, what are the odds? We've seen a lot of this card or that card, but in general, that hasn't happened. Most turns tend to take about 10 seconds, so it just runs around the table, and it just feels like the game has a very good pace and quite a good number of things to think about. Positive point number 2 is that I wasn't really expecting a push your luck vibe to this game, but I think it's there. When you are making these purchases, you take these goods and you put them into your area, you are essentially gambling to a certain extent. You're looking at the ships, and I mean, sometimes you do that and it immediately puts a ship into the dock and you sell and there's no randomness there. But if you're not in that situation, if you're pushing ships out into that black tide area, well, you're hoping that that ship is going to make it and it's not going to sink and you're going to lose those goods. Maybe you have some insurance cards in your hand so you can kind of hedge your bets, but using those as insurance makes you lose some buying power in your hand, which is not great either. Now, you can look at the farms and you can see 3 out of the 5 next cards to come out, so you can make an educated guess as to whether buying this set from the market is a good idea. If that red ship is about to go there and all 3 of those cards are red, well, maybe you don't buy from the market in such a situation so that you're going to lose all those when the red ship docks. But maybe there are no red ships out there and you feel safe and you take those. Well, you push those cards down, but you reveal 2 more random cards from the top of the deck. And that's kind of where this push your luck vibe comes in. Those could be 2 red cards right there, and right away that thing that you just spent all that money on, a bunch of that stuff might just wash away in the tide, and you feel kind of bummed out about that. But maybe that doesn't happen, and you need to push your luck in order to have these goods to sell. If you play super conservatively, it doesn't seem like you are going to get as many points. So in the end, the kind of push your luck, looking at the futures market and making some educated guesses is a fun aspect of the game that I wasn't really expecting. So now let's move into the neutral points. And the first of these is that I'm not really sure how you go about doing well at this game, and that sentiment has been mirrored by most of the people I played the game with so far. I did just mention that if you take no risks, that you probably won't do very well, but beyond that, I'm not really sure how you go about consistently doing very well or winning at this game. More often than not, it seems like the person who has won has been surprised by that. They feel like they were doing terribly, and well, really, I'm the person who won. I kept losing goods to the black tide. And ultimately, everybody has been losing goods to the black tide kind of all game long. So everybody's constantly feeling like they're not doing very well, and one of those people ends up winning the game. And I've played the game a few times now, and even the last time I played it, I just felt like I was in the same situation I was in the first game, where I'm making educated decisions. I'm, looking at the boats in the black tide and the ones that aren't, and I'm buying things from the market, like trying to hedge my bets and trying to pull cards up and even use that reservation token. I'm really not sure how to do that well, but try to use it to my advantage, and it doesn't seem like it works out that well. Specifically, that reservation token, it seems like half the time that gets used, it bites that person back instead of giving them a bonus, because now everybody else is getting a discount to buying things from the market because they can't buy that one card they put the token down on, but that person doesn't get a discount. They have to buy this huge thing out there, and so ultimately they usually just end up pulling it into their hand for money to kind of get out of a vicious cycle of giving everybody discounts on the market. And that's usually when they're bummed about that, when they put the reservation token down specifically to try and purchase that card into their player area. So I think with time, I will likely get better at the game, but at this point, I don't directly see the avenue to that, and it's already turned off a couple of the people I play games with. And neutral number 2 is pretty simple. There are a couple annoying design elements to this game that make playing the game a little bit harder. First of all, as I showed in the gameplay example, one of the cards just straight up has a sort of typo on it where the 3 is overlapped on top of the 2, and you can kind of tell it's a 3 because the other one is visible, but if you're just looking at it from afar, it's kind of a convoluted mess of numbers. And then on top of that, just all the numbers in general, they don't really jump off the card as well as I'd like as being the number that they are. The 2 and the 5, if you just glance down, man, just the way the iconography works out, they look so similar, and just I think that they went with far too blocky of numbers for those cards. If they had gone with much more swoopy numbers, it would jump out at what exactly those cards are specifically trying to be. Now, this hasn't really screwed up the game. Nobody's taken a card because they thought it was something else, but it's just something that's kind of scratched at me from the background as I'm playing the game. It's just a little annoyance when I'm trying to read what these cards are. So now let's go into the one negative I have for the game, and that is that I really dislike the math you have to do when you are finally selling your goods in for victory points, for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that teaching this game is much harder because of it. The game is so elegant as you're teaching it. Oh, just put this token down, your turn is done, or just draw a card and your turn is done. Buy everything from the market, just do some simple addition and your turn is done. But then you get to the point where you're selling goods at the market and it's like you slapped everybody at the table in the face. They all go, wait, what did you just say? Was that a joke? And you're like, no, that's not actually a joke. You find the big one and then you add and then you multiply and then you round and then you divide, and that's actually what you do. And more often than not, you end up just cashing in the points for those cards. Like, you have 3 cards, you're probably going to score 3 cards. You have 4 cards, you're probably going to score 4 cards. Occasionally you will score 1 less. Occasionally you will score 1 more. But in general, it's just the number of cards. And I feel like there could have been a solution out there that they could have designed in that maybe it would have been like 70 or 80% as good as the current one in the box, but that would be like 3 times more streamlined. You know, maybe just icons on the card and find the card with the most icons and add that to the achievement tokens you have, and that's what you score. Or something much simpler that doesn't have all these different steps along the way. Now, once you do this a couple times, you do it quite quickly. The math is not difficult, it's just annoying that you have to jump through all these hoops to usually just score the number of cards. It feels like an inside joke that made it into the game, and ultimately I just like it. I feel like they could have done better. So let's discuss replayability now. Traders of Osaka is one of those games where you're pretty much going to be doing the same thing every turn of every game. You know, the 3rd turn is going to be very similar to your 25th turn within a specific game, but when it is your turn, you do have interesting decisions, and you have some risks you can take, and cards that you can grab, and things that you can look out to all the other players. So I enjoy that turn that you are having pretty much every single turn, and there is an ebb and flow where you're going to be taking a couple turns to grab money, and then you cash out and get some goods, and then a couple turns to grab money. But in general, it is a bit samey feeling, and I played the game a couple times now, and I've enjoyed playing it each time, but I haven't unlocked or seen anything too much deeper in there. As I mentioned before, I don't really know how to play the game well, so hopefully with another couple plays, I'll start to see patterns in the way I can do much better at the game, maybe trying to target specific achievement tokens more often than not. In general, at the end of the day, I think the replayability of this game is tolerable. It's okay. I don't think it's that great. If anything, it's a little less than average, but I can still see myself playing it at least 5 or 6 more times. Alright, so now let's discuss player count. Traders of Osaka plays 2 to 4 players, and I think that the best player count is probably 3. So let's talk about the 2-player game first. It plays quite well, but it seems like the reserve token is pretty much non-existent. That might be because I'm playing the game poorly and I'm not really sure how to do well, but every time it got used, and it only got used like maybe once or twice in the 2-player game I played, it just backfired on the person. It just didn't really seem to make sense. Beyond that, the game made sense because you're just going back and forth. There's not that much chaos. But I think that the 3-player game played a little bit better. That reserve token felt a little more important, and there was more to bounce off of. You have 2 different opponents that might be going for different types of goods, so there's a little bit more interesting things going on with the ships out on the ocean. And then the 4-player game, it worked pretty well. I would not have a problem playing 4-player again, but those ships and the way they move was a little bit more chaotic because there are 3 different turns that are going to happen before your next turn, so it seems like more often than in the other player counts, you're going to lose goods to the ocean because those ships just move a lot faster when there are so many turns between your next turn. In conclusion, Traders of Osaka intrigues me. It is an interesting game to play. I have enjoyed playing it, but at the same time, as I've mentioned a couple times, I haven't really felt like I've done well at the game, and I'm not really sure how to get too much better. This has gone over kind of average with my playgroup. There have been a couple players who just really didn't like it, and there are a couple people who are like me where they finish the game, they don't know why they lost or why they won, but they're like, I want to play it again to try and figure it out because it's an odd little game. You have that weird math you have to do when you're selling goods, which I obviously didn't like. I went into quite a bit, but you have a lot of really cool decisions to make. It's a very simple game in general with the options that you have available to you on your turn to grab from that market, and I like that. I like simple turns because it just makes the game play relatively quickly. I will say that the 4-player game felt a little longer than I want it to be. Like, it probably got like 45 to 50 minutes, and for a game where you're kind of doing the same thing throughout the whole game, I wish it was a little bit shorter, and I think that's another reason why I like the 3-player game a little bit better. So all in all, I'm interested to keep trying this game to try and see where I'm going wrong and how to get better at it, but ultimately it has a couple weirdnesses and a couple flaws that I dislike that has also turned off a couple people in my group. So I would suggest you give this game a try if it sounds interesting to you, but this is not a wholehearted endorsement. If you'd like to see more in-depth board game reviews like this one, as well as full game playthroughs and vlogs, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.